Hey, folks. What a show we have for you today. Very excited about it, but I'm also very excited to tell you about the sponsor we're working with here over at Verbal Shenanigans. As we turn the corner from the cold, dreary winter into the warmer days of spring, a new season of fantasy baseball begins at DynastySportsEmpire.com. DynastySportsEmpire.com offers you a unique fantasy baseball experience for owners young and old and abilities of all levels. So what makes DSE unique? For starters, you can draft high school and international baseball phenoms as young as 16. You can retain ownership of your favorite players for their entire career and build a cash cow contender that would make any front office envious for years to come. Check out all the fantasy baseball formats over at DynastySportsEmpire.com today or tweet them at DSE Fantasy. That's at DSE Fantasy on Twitter or online at DynastySportsEmpire.com. All right, guys, let's get to today's episode.
But our shenanigans are cheeky and fun.
Yeah, I mean, his shenanigans are cruel and tragic.
Which makes them not shenanigans at all, really.
Evil shenanigans.
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
Hello, everybody. Welcome on back to Verbal Shenanigans. Mike, we climb towards 400. We climb on our way to 400 episodes.
Step 1, 351. First step.
It is. 300. Go ahead.
No, this is like when you're like midway through like climbing Everest. You're looking up and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But all right, step 1.
Yep. So today, anyway, I'm Mike. I'm Scott. You're Mike.
Are?
You're Mike.
You lucky son of a...
And this is Verbal Shenanigans podcast. So welcome to any new listeners, old listeners. Now, this week, the reason we're not like, I don't know. We usually come in and talk about nonsense. Like if you listen to last week, we went on for 20 minutes about the hot dog to hamburger ratio at a barbecue. And we usually play nonsense type of games and things like that. But it kind of doesn't feel apropos, if you will, to today's episode. What we've if you're tuning in, we always have an interesting guest on the show. Now, I would say 90% of the time they're artists and actors and athletes and tons of musicians, and then we do few and far between of just really unique people, whether it's a hippo tax survivor or a world's fastest backwards mile or the world's heaviest sportswoman, whatever. We've done a lot of different things, but tonight we're trying something. Not trying something. I guess we're interviewing someone who it doesn't seem right for us to play some stupid game about bears attacking people or who said it,
man.
Yeah, who said it, Gandhi or Limbaugh. It doesn't quite fit into this episode. And I guess I'll kind of segue why. So in a few minutes, we're going to bring on a man by the name of Clark Fredericks. Okay, now Clark Fredericks, if you Google his name, it'll pop up. His story was worldwide, made a lot of headlines, a lot of controversy. And Clark, I guess we could just go straight to the point. Clark was sexually abused and molested by his Scoutmaster for years and years and years. And I'll let him tell most of his story. But in the end, Clark eventually murdered his Scoutmaster. And it's a really now it might sound a little shocking up front, but it's a really interesting story and kind of pretty amazing, the story and the honesty that Clark kind of brings to talking about it. He's gone on to be a motivational speaker. He does gigs all over the country. He's helped a lot of people who are victims of sexual abuse and whatnot. So, like I said, it kind of feels a little strange if we came out here swinging with some dumb story from mine or Mike's life.
Yeah, it just it don't feel right. Like we we've already taped the interview. It's a fascinating interview, and it's something you're going to enjoy. But at the same time, it doesn't mesh with wacky hijinks before or after, if you will. You know what I mean?
It's not our norm, but I'm very glad we did it. The only thing I can compare it to months ago, maybe that was even last year already.
Last year.
Yeah, last year. We had a woman by the name of Jenny Carreri on the show, and her sister was murdered many years ago at this point, and basically one of her life's missions is to find her sister's killer. And it was kind of in a similar vein. Me and Mike were like, well, we've never done this, but of course we're going to, interview this person and try to help out and whatnot. And if they got a story to tell, we are always here to listen. So that's kind of, I guess, the preview, if you will, the warning in some ways. But I don't want to really kind of fluff it up, and I don't want to tell Clark's story for him. I'd rather you guys listen to him tell his story, and then you guys kind of react to it and take it in. So I apologize if this week is not full of comedy, but I think it is a very valuable episode here in the catalog of this show. So without further ado, here is Clark Fredericks. Hey, Clark, how's it going, man?
Hey, Scott.
I'm Scott. That's Mike right there. Clark, how are you doing, man?
What's up, guys?
We're doing good, man. Right. Thanks for giving us a few minutes here. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, awesome. No problem.
So Clark, this was, it's been, we've been doing this show for 7 years or so, and we've had so many people from different walks of life, artists and musicians and people who have been attacked by hippos and, a million different things. And when it came to you, I had found you I actually listened through an episode of Sword and Scale with you. There was a phenomenal episode. And I was just like, man, this is a guy I would like to talk to. And I know you're from Jersey. I live right here in Denville, New Jersey. So,
brother.
So it was like, all right, this is local. I was part of the Boy Scouts my whole life. So a lot of things kind of stuck with me. But I will say this is an interview that we were really like, man, this is something really different for the show. So we do appreciate your time coming on, and I look forward to talking to you here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you don't have to, I don't know where you're going to head with this story, but you don't have to feel odd asking me any questions. I'm an open book. So awesome. Whatever avenue you want to go down, I'm more than willing.
Yeah. I actually wanted to start the interview. I thought it would be interesting to start the interview instead of origin story right away and in kind of the beginning. I kind of wanted to start in the present, kind of where you're at in life. And you've had, we'll get to your story and the things you've been through and the amazing story. But I wanted to start kind of in the present because I think it's kind of cool for people to kind of hear where you're at and then maybe learn where you came from.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I know I've looked at your Twitter. I know you're really into Bitcoin and fitness and cryptocurrency and things like that. And then of course your speaking engagements and motivational speaking and whatnot. So where is Clark Fredericks today? What occupies your time? What occupies your business and whatnot and your life in general?
Yeah, let me bring up faith into this real quick.
Sure.
And if you split my life in half, the first half of my life was without faith. And my first half of the life was filled with self-indulgence, with anger, with hate, with rage, with violence, with sex, with pornography, with drugs, with alcohol, with murder,
right,
and with prison. That's the first half of my life where I went through angry at God. I started off in the Episcopal Church, And that back then they taught you, God's a sovereign God. If you do good things will happen to you. If you step out of line, you incur God's wrath.
Right.
And here I'm thinking, how could I have possibly incurred God's wrath at age 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? So I abandoned faith. The second half of my life, where we're at now, is instead of being selfish and self-indulgent, I'm giving back. My mission is to help people.
Right.
I became an advocate for the changing of the statute of limitations law in New Jersey. Guys and girls had been working 15 years to change this law. It was an archaic law. You had basically from age 18 to 20 to file a lawsuit against your abuser or against the organization that harbored your abuser.
18 to 20.
And there's nobody, if you get violently sexually assaulted at a young age, you're not coming forward at 18 just to file a lawsuit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a ridiculous law, and many people said it would never be changed. And I came on as an advocate and used my story as strength to sway senators and assemblymen. And in 2 years, we had a new law, and we have the strongest law in the country now. So instead of having to file a lawsuit at age 18, you have up until age 55 now.
That's great.
And there's also what was holding up the whole works was we wanted a 2-year open window where anybody, no matter how old they were, if you were 60 and the law says you have up till age 55, if you were 70 or 80, we wanted a 2-year open window where anybody could come forward to file a lawsuit. And that was the big holding up point. And in the end, we got that 2-year window. So that was a major milestone. And that was something myself and all the other advocates can go to our grave proud about. I sat in prison and I heard an internal voice tell me, you're going to become a motivational speaker. And I had been deathly afraid of speaking. And yet within 4 months from my release from prison, I got offered a chance to speak at Centenary College as my first speaking gig. And then I was invited back there 2 years in a row for April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So I went back every year. And from there, speaking gigs just opened up. I got contacted by the director of an off-Broadway play in Manhattan.
Wow.
The play was based on molestation. And he asked twice if I would come in and stand on stage at the conclusion of the play and tell my story and take questions from the audience, which I did. I spoke at churches, AA meetings, substance abuse centers. Those are a big one for my story. I work out at the gym I work out at. The sheriff of our county works out there. And he came up to me after my release from prison and said, anything I can do for you, you let me know.
It's amazing.
And about a year or so after my release from prison, I went up to him and I said, hey, I've got this strong desire to go back to the jail where I was held and speak to the inmates. Can you make it happen? And he said, I don't see why not. 2 weeks later,
wow.
I'm walking back into the Sussex County Jail where I was facing life in prison. And I got to share my story with the inmates, give them hope, give them inspiration, and teach them how to take their life down a new path.
That's great.
I was held at Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey.
Right.
I had after the county jail, I had to go to prison in Newark. I even got contacted by Northern State Prison to come back in as a motivational speaker, and we were setting it up right before COVID hit. And that put everything on hold, which is amazing in itself that they would ask me back in to do that there.
Right.
I did a documentary with NBC. I have no idea how they heard about me. When you go in a new direction, when you let God into your life, if you want to say, I'm not a Bible thumper. Mm-hmm. I became a born again Christian. I got baptized upon my release from prison.
Right.
But you'll find that if you go in a new direction, doors just open for you. And that's what's happened to me. One door has opened another door, another door, another door. I do Sword and Scale, and here I am with you. You know?
Yeah.
It just happens. And I tell everybody that. I'm like, don't get caught up on how it's going to happen. It'll happen. Just decide that you're done with the destructive life and you're going to go in a new direction. So the second half of my life, that's been going on. I did the documentary with NBC. That led to me being on the Tamron Hall daytime talk show on ABC at 10 a.m. on Channel 7.
It's crazy.
From there, that led to me getting offered a speaking contract by a firm out of L.A., Elite Speakers International, to sign me as a speaker. So that little voice as I sat in a prison cell telling me, you're going to become a motivational speaker, all of a sudden last year at this time, January of last year, I signed the contract.
Wow.
To become a speaker, and then COVID hit, and
it'll be back. It'll be back.
But, so that's been the two halves of my life. So when people question faith or spirituality or God, that's my testimony. Look at the first half of my life.
Yeah.
Destruction.
Living proof.
The second half is endless possibilities opening up for me.
It's amazing.
That's amazing. I mean, you've been very vocal about like being honest about everything that happened to you. I'm kind of curious, when you started doing these motivational speeches and telling your story, did you have some people that tried to say, well, we want you to tell the story, but like kind of calm down the details or anything like that? Because a lot of people get worried about, scaring off an audience, or maybe somebody who went through the same thing getting over emotional. Did people try to set you in the lane and
absolutely
take your own path?
Yeah, and the people that tried, where I wanted to concentrate speaking was in the high school level and the college level. Get them to open up while they're young, so they don't develop addictions later on in life and self-destruction habits. And I went to, I won't name the school district, but I went to a school district in my county of Sussex County, New Jersey. And I met with the principal, and he said, Clark, we have two problems with you speaking here. I said, what's that? And he said, one, you have to take the word rape out of your story. And I go,
it's happening everywhere.
What do you want me to replace it with? And he goes, a traumatic life event. You can just say, at age 10 to 12, I suffered a traumatic life event. I go, okay, and what's the other thing you want me to take out? He goes, you can't say the word murder. You have to remove that. So he wanted the two bookends of how I got from A to Z removed. And I go, what do you want me to replace murder with?
He wanted to Disneyfy your life story. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, and I said, what do you want me to replace murder with? And he's like, well, you can just say my traumatic life event led me down many wrong paths.
Hey,
and I'm like,
all these kids would go home after and just Google into,
So the girl that's being molested by her uncle or father, and the kid that's being molested by a priest, they're gonna sit there and hear my story and say, what's this guy talking about?
And this is
I said
that is a huge.
I just said thanks, but I won't be speaking here.
I mean, that is a huge problem that we say millennials and Gen Z, they can't. We do it. We're the ones who pillow the impact from them, and we think they can't handle these things, and then they have to learn it on their own or learn it from the wrong place. That is a tragedy too. Like we try to come from a good place, but we forget where the real learning takes place. Like when you were talking, I just thought of I remember in middle school, still remember this, we had a Holocaust survivor come in, and it was no holds bar. She told us everything, and it still sticks with me to this day. What a tragedy that was. It made you interested in that kind of learning like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell I get, it depends where you're trying to speak to,
Well,
up here in Sussex, it's a very conservative area. I went. This was probably the wealthiest town in the county that I went to, and my first speech at the high school level was at a charter school in the Bronx, and they reached out to me and said, we have students from all over the world that come here and they've had horrific lives and they need to hear your story. And don't feel afraid to use any type of language you want. And I was like,
it's good.
Fine. I went and did this speech, and I spoke to just the seniors. And, you know, I'm an older white guy. This was younger, Black, Latino, you know, of various countries. And when I finished, the whole audience stormed the stage to hug me and take selfies and shake my hand and talk.
That's awesome.
It was the most amazing thing. And they were so blown away that they asked me to come back 2 months later to speak to the juniors,
wow.
which I did. And the same thing, I told my story, and when I ended it, they all came mobbing me up.
It's amazing.
So it was awesome.
It's great.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into the story right from the beginning. You know, you get molested when you're 7 years old. It's a family friend. It's your scout leader. Your life was kind of traumatizing before that with the heart condition where you had surgery. Was there any good memories from like being born to before that moment? Do you have any recollection of happiness and playing, or is it?
You know, I tell people this. I'm like, I feel so cheated that the traumatic events are so imprinted on my psyche that they have blocked out all the good things. Like, can I remember my 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th birthday? No. Did I have birthday parties? I'm sure I did. Can I remember a single one of them? No. Can I remember this guy pulling my pants down and performing oral sex on me? Yes. Can I remember him raping me? Yes. Can I remember him beating his dog to death in front of me to keep me silent? Yes. Those are the things that stand out, and it's blurred all the good I had, and it pisses me off. That's what pisses me off.
Yeah. So I guess, can you, I mean, we don't have to go into everything, but can you kind of tell like a version of a summary of your story and what happened to you? Because I feel like if people are listening now and they have no idea, you know, who you are, we're talking about all the things that circled it, but let's get to the middle of it, your story.
Not the childhood part?
The childhood leading up to everything, really. Like, if you can kind of break down a little timeline of it, I guess.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you a quick synopsis. You know, I had a 6-year older brother who joined the Scouts.
Right.
And from his involvement in the Scouts, his Scoutmaster befriended our family. And my parents owned a restaurant back then. My father put on big Sunday night dinners. He would always come over and drink wine and laugh. He spent Christmas with us and Thanksgiving. He would stop by. We had a lot of acreage for hunting, and he would hunt on our land. And he was just like, he was always around. And we took him in as one of our own, but all the while his wheels are churning, seeing victims,
right.
Seeing, you know, he was a predator of children.
Yep.
And I'm just one family. He probably had multiple families and victims at various stages that he was working on. So, you know, at age 7, he did his first physical grooming of me by touching my open heart surgery scar that I had just had a few months prior. Mm-hmm. It led to wrestling matches where he was obviously erect. It led to him getting me drunk and performing oral sex on me. And then at age 12, he raped me. And not only did he rape me, but he had a coon dog, and coon dogs have a long, drawn-out bark.
Bellow,
And because of my cries and my screams, his dog was going nuts over my cries and screams. And it would not stop barking. And when he got done raping me, he sat me down at his kitchen table and he brought his dog in right in front of me and just beat it unconscious. Whether it died, lived, I don't know. And I felt responsible for that dog. That was, to me, that dog getting beat was worse than the rape I just went through, because I felt responsible for that dog. And he told me if I opened my mouth, this is what would happen to me. So, what am I supposed to do at that point? You know, and next to my father, this guy is who I respected the most. It was my father and this guy.
Yeah.
He's a lieutenant. He's a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. If I can't trust a lieutenant in the sheriff's department, a scoutmaster, who am I supposed to trust? And I was sealed silent. I just thought I could bury this pain, this shame, deep down inside and go about my life. But almost immediately, my boundaries, I started, you know, we all have boundaries we live within.
Live within, yeah.
And even at age 12 in 7th grade, I blew through boundaries. I started smoking marijuana 3 months later on a weekly basis. I went to high school and switched, you know, added alcohol to it. And then I went to college. And on top of the alcohol, being a blackout drunk in college, I tried cocaine for the first time and absolutely loved it. It made me, took all those, you know, weak feelings away from me and made me feel strong. And what I did early on in my life, in my 20s and 30s, is I sabotaged everything. I sabotaged careers. I sabotaged relationships, because I never wanted to feel trapped. And trapped is how I felt at that guy's house. And my subconscious has said, we're never going to be trapped in a relationship. We're never going to be trapped in a long-term career. We'll cut and run, and we'll just go on to the next. And that's how I lived my life. And I got nowhere. I got stuck in the mud. I developed a gambling addiction. I got in debt to the mob for a huge figure. In my 40s, I've since learned that those who have been abused suffer from PTSD.
Right.
And in my 40s, something triggered my PTSD. I fell into the hugest depression and having no coping skills, having this pain and shame that I'm carrying. I just turned to alcohol and drugs to like cope. And I was living that way when one day after work, I ran into my rapist in a deli as I was making a coffee. He comes walking in, and he's got a young boy by his side about the age he raped me at. And I hear that young boy call him the same nickname he used to make me call him. And it just ripped open everything I had buried for 30 years. And I ran out of the store that day. I sped down the road. I cursed, I spit in my truck, I pounded the steering wheel, and that was it. My life deteriorated after that. I talked about eroding boundaries. Doing heroin was a boundary that was way, way over there. Right. You know, smart, college-educated guy from a great middle-class family would never, ever, ever do heroin. Yeah, right. When you're in so much pain and turmoil and you don't care about living or dying anymore, I dove into heroin. I was doing cocaine nonstop around the clock, just getting single-digit hours of sleep for a week. And this went on and on and on until one night, a few months after that encounter, I drove to his house to confront him, and a violent struggle ensued, and I stabbed him to death. And then I was arrested the next day and charged with first-degree murder, facing life in prison. That's a quick synopsis of my story.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta like as you're talking, the hairs on my arms are standing up. This has to be the first interview. I got some tears in my, it's rough, man. And I mean, I'm sure everyone said that. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You know, I hear your story, and I'm like, you know, I was in the Boy Scouts all the way through Eagle Scouts. I just had a son 5 months ago, and so just all those, you know, all these other thoughts and stuff that could have been me, you know, like God forbid that was ever him, you know. I can't imagine what you go through, but I guess my next question would be, so this happens, the event happens, you get arrested, you go to prison, you get sentenced to prison. Was there an immediate backlash at you, like as far as the public? Did nobody know your story, or was your story out there quickly as far as why your motive, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I dated a girl, you know, for a few years, and her son-in-law was a corrections officer in the jail. And I knew him, you know, he was, you know, a good friend of mine. And they kept me, when I got arrested, they kept me for 4 weeks in the suicide cell. They didn't know what to do with me. I just murdered I had murdered one of their own,
right,
who spent his 25-year career in the jail I'm now housed in. So, you know, my story is to inspire people that no matter what you're facing in life, you can overcome. Because if I can overcome facing life in prison for murdering, regardless of that he was a pedophile, murdering a lieutenant in the sheriff's department, and then his role was to patrol the halls of the jail. Now I'm in that very jail where he worked 25 years. So you want to talk about a mountain to have to overcome. I had the odds stacked against me, and yet here I am today. So getting back to your question, they kept me in that suicide cell, and I thought everybody must think I'm a monster. And this correctional officer came in about my third day, and he walked in and he had a beaming smile, and he's like, "Hey, my man, how are you?" And I'm down and out, depressed, thinking my life's over. And I asked him, I said, "Does everybody view me as a monster?" And he said, "Are you effing kidding me?" He goes, "Pegg's the monster." He goes, Dennis Pegg was who raped me, and who's the sheriff's officer. He goes, "Everybody in the community wants to know why this animal was still walking around, why he wasn't stopped." He goes, "Somebody has already started." This is the third day after my arrest. He goes, "Somebody's already started a Free Clark campaign." He goes, "And they're making up bumper stickers and shirts and hats, and there's a Facebook page." He goes, "The community's behind you, bro." He goes, "You got to keep your head on." He goes, "You know, it's going to take a while." He goes, "But this'll all work out." Wow. So that was my first.
Wow.
And before he came in, you know, I thought at bare minimum, because I killed one of their own, that they were going to take me into some closet, you know, where there's no camera, and give me the beating of a lifetime.
Right.
You know, that blue wall, you know, they all stick together. And yet, one by one, guys who would come into that suicide cell, they have to do checks on you. So guys were, you know, constantly coming in. And they would say, "Hey, man, I'm hearing a lot of rumors about this guy. I never worked with him, but you're not going to have any problems from me." The next guy would walk in. "Hey, I'm hearing this guy was a real piece of shit. You're not going to have any problems from me." Next guy walks in. "How come you don't have a pillow?" I go, "I don't know. I'm in a suicide cell. I don't know if you're allowed to have them." He goes, "You're allowed to have them." He goes, "I'll go get you 2 of them." Brings me 2 pillows. And it was just like that. So that was the interactions before this guy walked in and said, "The community's rallying behind you." And they did.
Out of curiosity, do you recall if you, like, after it all raged and they brought you in, do you recall, like, telling everybody, "Hey, I was molested by this guy. This is why I did it"? Were you keeping quiet? Was there a sense before you got basically they were seeing the evidence that they could understand what was going on with you?
Well, I picked, lawyers started coming in to see me, a couple days after my arrest. And I settled on a lawyer, about a week or so after my arrest. And he's like, look, man, you have to keep your mouth shut. You cannot talk to the guards who may try to get friendly with you. You can't trust inmates. He goes, don't tell anybody your story. So I didn't say anything to anybody the whole time I was in there. My story, though, was an international story. It was It aired in 37 countries, I believe. It was coast to coast. I was on the front page of the LA Times. And every time I had a court appearance, it was on the front page of the local papers around here. And they all made mention of, I made one statement. I didn't give a statement to the state police, but when I was spread-eagled on my lawn and got handcuffed, a guy I knew who was in the prosecutor's office, we had gone out, we had met at bars and had beers throughout the years. He came over to me and he's like, Clark, why in the world? Why, bro? Why? And I said, is this off the record? And he said, yeah, of course. And I said, he was a fucking pedophile, and he was a scumbag molester, and he got what he deserved. The next day, on the front page of the paper, is Fredericks claims Pegg was a pedophile and got what he deserved.
Wow. So
it was out there from day one why it happened.
So after you start hearing this, now I'm guessing you are also coming down from drugs and not having that. And where does your mind go as far as the hope part of it, still craving drugs? Like, where are you mentally during this time? Are you just like the fact that you just committed murder? Like,
when I was in that suicide cell, I was having hallucinations, hearing conversations that weren't existing. I was seeing black shadows swirl around the cell.
Wow.
I had been I was doing cocaine around the clock. I was eating Xanax like they were Tic Tacs. I was taking so many Xanax, the jail put me back on Xanax because you're not supposed to stop abruptly.
Yeah.
You're supposed to wean yourself off. So they put me back on for a while and then eventually weaned me off of them. But yeah, I'm hallucinating. My mind is somebody in that suicide cell before me had scratched into the wall next to my head where I was lying. Kill me. I just want to die. And that's all I could think of while I was in there, is I just wanted to die. And when I eventually, after the suicide cell, they kept me for 4 weeks in an isolation cell because I had a cast on, and they considered that a weapon.
Right.
So I had to wait 7 weeks before I could be in general population. And when I got into general population, every morning at 7 a.m., this overhead light comes on at shift change, and it literally shocks you out of your sleep. And that light became the bane of my existence. And I just woke up cursing every day. Every morning I woke up cursing my life, cursing that light, cursing everything. And I didn't want to go on with life. I didn't want to spend 30 years in that environment.
Right.
And I called out to God, who I had nothing to do with one day. I said, God, please help me find a way to kill myself in here or to heal myself. I can't go on another day feeling like this. And for the first time in my life, I heard that internal voice. I spoke about the internal voice saying you're going to be a motivational speaker. That was years later in prison. But I heard it that day in that cell say, you have to pick up one of these books and start reading. People from all over the country were sending me books. Like I said, my story was front page LA Times, Baltimore Sun, New York Post, Daily News, blah, blah, blah. And there was every cell on my tier almost had my books in it. I had so many books. And there was a tiny book. I heard that voice and I looked at the books in my cell. And the smallest book, I picked it up, and it was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, like you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, I'll start with this one. It's the smallest. I should be able to get through it. And there was a sentence in there that just turned a light on in me. And it's to paraphrase it's when you're faced with a situation that will not change, you must change yourself. And I reread it 100 times. I underlined it. I circled it. And I'm like, all right, my situation isn't going to improve anytime soon. I got to change myself. And the only way I could do that was to read all these books and take something out of each book and apply it to myself, and to develop a relationship with a higher power. And that's what I started to do.
Wow.
So when you go through all your time in jail, I mean, you're now cleaned up. You've been reading up on everything. You have a goal of being, a speaker. When they open that door for the first time and say you're a free man, are you in your mind prepared for that? Is there any way to really prepare for that after that whole ordeal and getting out into the sunlight? Or is there like a whole period of time where it's just like, I gotta go like into a cave and just be myself for a while?
Yeah, man, that's exactly what you want to do. It's I was in for 5 years, and that 5 years had me so off kilter coming back into society. There's guys that do it for 20, 30 plus, and they're complete basket case. My family said one of my buddies wanted to throw a huge party for me when I got out. And I said, are you guys out of your mind? I said, I don't want to see anybody. I want to get out of here and be left alone.
Yeah.
And I walked out that day. I had my niece. I'm very close with one of my nieces, and she's the one who picked me up. And she took me to a diner straight from there. And then I left with just the clothes that were on my back. I had nothing, no clothes anywhere. And she took me to Kohl's and, took me shopping to get stuff. And then from there, I had to see my mother. And after that, I just laid low for a while and just flew under the radar for as long as I could.
So we left off with you kind of in that mindset as far as in prison and whatnot. When did things start to change and start to look better and start to give you some glimmer of hope that you were there was a chance you can get out of there?
Yeah, again, I don't want to alienate, people who don't have faith, but
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Early on in my incarceration, my mother came for a visit, and she stood outside the jail waiting to come in, and her minister had been in to see somebody's kid. And he walked out, saw her, gave her a hug, and he grabbed her by the shoulders and said, I want you and Clark to start praying on the number 5 as in a 5-year sentence. And this is a few months into my incarceration where I'm suicidal. My life is over. I'm facing 30 to life. And this guy's telling us to pray for a 5. My mother comes in, tells me this story, and I put my head in my hands like this, and I go, Mom, you have to pick a number that's a little more realistic. A 5 is never going to happen. And she goes, son, I believe in God. I believe in miracles, and I want you to start believing in God and the miracles. And I'm asking you to please start praying on a 5. I was putting this lady through hell by what had happened.
Right.
And there's no way I could deny her. And I said, I'm sorry. I will start praying on a 5. And from that day forward, I prayed on a 5 nonstop. I read books on meditation, and I was practicing in my cell. I put a 5 into that. I read books on using a mantra to quiet your mind. I put a 5 into that. And, I sat for 3 years with 30 to life hanging over my head. It suffocates you. You can say whatever you want that, would they get 12 jurors to convict me for murdering this guy? I don't know. At the end of the day, I brutally murdered him, and I can't get around that.
Right.
So there was no guarantee that, had I gone to trial, I wouldn't have gotten found guilty. Now, for 3 years, I sat there with 30 to life. I'm reading, I'm meditating, I'm using a mantra, but the whole time that 30 to life is over me. And finally, at the 3-year mark, the prosecutor, we had to do a psych evaluation on me. And just before that 3-year mark, a few months before it, we released my psych report to the prosecution. And in that report, it's not like the movies where, there's a big whodunit. That psych report has everything that happened in my childhood with Pegg and everything that happened the night of the murder. So now there's no dancing around what happened. They read that report and came back a few months later and offered a plea deal to second-degree manslaughter. Second-degree manslaughter carries 5 to 10. So instead of facing 30 to life, it's 5 to 10. I've already sat for 3 years. My lawyer said, I'll gladly go to trial. He goes, but if it goes wrong, you're probably going to die in prison. And you're not going to be there for your mother when she dies. He goes, you've already got 3 years in. You take the plea deal 5 to 10. Even if it's a 10,
7.
You got to do another 5 years. You have to do 85% of your sentence. So it was simply too risky to go to trial. So at the end of the day, I took the plea deal.
Wow.
And when I finally went to court, the judge had the discretion for my sentencing. So once you accept the plea deal, then it's up to the judge to decide how much to give you. And judges don't like to be on the low end. They want to be in the middle to the high. And especially on a case like this, my lawyer's trying to, get me prepared for the 10,
Yep.
And yet when I went to court, the judge apologized for what happened to me. He apologized for having to be in a position to sentence me to prison. But he said, I'm going to give you the minimum 5 years.
Wow.
And I'm sorry that I even have to do that. So that 5 that I originally laughed at my mother, I now just got. And I turned to her, and she had tears coming down. I had tears coming down. And it was, an amazing moment, and
so great.
And to consider that, that 5 happened in that setting where this guy had worked for those 25 years.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing also,
When you got out, I mean, as they've researched, and so many people unfortunately felt the wrath of Dennis, and I heard about his nephew he molested and he committed suicide. I'm kind of curious, did any of his victims come up to you or talk to you afterwards, and kind of what are the conversations like if they did?
Yes. One of the reasons the prosecutor, on top of reading my psych report, one of the other reasons they offered me a plea deal was all the victims that came forward. But as many victims that came forward, there's still a lot of them that say, you know what, Clark took care of something thank God it's over. I'm not going to deal with this. And I got numerous Facebook private messages, Instagram private messages from people in the community who apologized for not coming forward and thanked me for what I did, that they were molested. They thanked me for ending his reign of terror, and they apologized for not having, for not coming forward at that time.
No.
So, yeah. So the answer is yes.
Now, did you?
I had a guy. He didn't want to become friends on Facebook, but he sent me a private message saying, going back to the early 70s, I didn't even know this, that Dennis was a camp counselor at High Point State Park. High Point is the highest, there's a monument, it's the highest part of New Jersey. Yep. And they had camps back in the 70s. And this guy went to the camp, and Dennis happened to be his camp counselor, and molested him. And I had a lady in the gym come up to me and say, "Are you Clark Fredericks?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "My girlfriend, her son joined the Audubon Society. Dennis was a Audubon member for watching birds." And she goes, "He molested her son on a bird watching trip." So he had his tentacles
everywhere
in a lot more areas. If you guys have a second, you Google Dennis Pegg obituary and you read his obituary. I think the family thought they were doing an honor for all the things he was involved in. It is so disturbing knowing what we know now about this guy, that he was in every organization under the sun that had access to children. He was a member of everything. And it's frightening.
Yeah,
it is.
Did you go from any period of regret of what you did into a period of like acceptance? Was there a period of time, or were you always okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, it should never have gotten to that point.
Gotcha.
And this is, killing Dennis Pegg did not solve my problems. Killing Dennis Pegg added a whole new problem to my existing problem. And every facet of law enforcement has come out on my side,
right,
including the prosecutor.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
The prosecutor of my case and I have talked numerous times since my release from prison. And he asked me one day, he said, "Clark, had you gotten away with the murder, what do you think your life would be like?" And I said, "Look, dude, I had one secret that was killing me and driving me quickly to the grave. If now I add on the secret of murder on top of the secret of my abuse, you think I'm going to have a great life?"
Yeah.
It would have been, I would have been dead. I would have died of a drug overdose, So, and that's what I get so many people. I can see on people's Facebook page if they're a liberal or a conservative. I get them all, men, women, liberal, conservative, sending me private messages. "You did what I have dreamt of doing to my abuser." They all say it. And my response is, "I know you want to, but it's not the answer." And it's not easy for me to say, after the fact,
right.
It's just, if you go do what I did, you really only have one of two options. You got to commit suicide right afterwards, or you got to get ready to face life in prison. There's not going to be another 5-year deal out there, because the courts. That's why they didn't let me walk. Is they're like, we have to deter other people from following in your footsteps, and that's why they sent me to prison. And to think that you're going to get a 5-year deal, you're not. And if you've never been to prison, it's a horrible existence.
Yeah.
Like, if you start healing, my motto is, I never healed. You have to start healing. You have to break your silence. If you break your silence, you go get therapy, you develop a relationship with God, you start working out, you get clean and sober. If you do those things, that desire to kill your abuser should start to wane. It should start to go away. You should start feeling better. It's not a life sentence because you were molested, but our minds keep us trapped in the abuse. Our minds, you sit on a couch for hours just rehearsing it over and over and over and over and over, and it makes you insane. Yeah. You have to take back control of your mind and take back control of your thoughts.
That's kind of an interesting thing I wanted to kind of lead to. I think we forgot to bring up in your story, like another thing that kind of led to your rage and murdering Dennis was seeing the Jerry Sandusky trial was starting right around the same time. I'm kind of curious now that everything that you've gone through and you've gone through the healing, when you hear something like a Jeffrey Epstein or any other kind of stories of molestation, like does your brain automatically go to a certain direction? Do you have to kind of like calm yourself down? Is there an instant reaction, or how can you react after this?
Yeah. I don't fixate anymore, and people reach out to me and they're like, you got to see the Michael Jackson documentary. Oh, what a scumbag. And I'm like, I don't want to watch it. Yeah. Sorry. I assume I know what he did. They're like, you got to see the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Oh, what a piece of shit. And I'm like, I really don't want to watch it. It's not healthy for me. I read everybody. I have answered everybody who's reached out to me on my website, on Facebook, on Instagram. I have answered every message, and it's been a lot. And some glance over what happened to them, and others go into full-blown detail. And it gets, it hurts my soul, to read all these. When I was working as an advocate for the changing of the law, us advocates got to testify before the House Judicial Committee. And I sat there all day long hearing all these horror stories, and it hurts you. And I just left there feeling, I just felt horrible.
Yeah.
So when I was in jail, I read this book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it's a book on mindfulness, and it's a book on taking back control of your mind and keeping it in the present moment. And that's the thing that all abuse victims suffer from, is constantly going backwards with their mind. And that book taught me how to just concentrate on the present moment. And when my mind wants to wander, immediately bring it back. And that's what I do. I don't fixate on Dennis Pegg, on the abuse. I can talk about it without fixating on it. I can talk about the murder without fixating on it. And that's the thing that people who reach out to me are still stuck on. They're still stuck on that fixation of the abuse over and over and over and over and over. And it makes you absolutely insane. Yeah. I tell people, you have to take back control of your thoughts and don't give that abuser any more real estate in your mind. Like, they can be dead, and yet you're still fixating on it. So they're still controlling you from the grave.
Right.
It's a sin. You shouldn't do it.
Clark, I could talk to you for another 2 hours, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. This has been like a very meaningful, one of our best interviews, and it's just would love to even have you on down the line to talk about what you're up to. But
absolutely,
you work with so many different places, and you speak, and I don't want to sum it up for the audience. So, you do a lot of amazing things. So what are some of the things you're doing and the work you do? And if people want to find you and reach out or see what you've got going on, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah. COVID put a damper on stuff that was going on.
Right.
last January, I quit my job to get ready to speak full time, and I had speeches lined up from March through July,
right?
And everything got shut down. So I've done Zoom speeches. You need that connection to be in front of people with this type of story. Yeah. It's still impactful through a computer, but you really need to be in front of people. Right. And I just portray, and it's not, my story isn't directed solely to molestation victims, to drug addicts. It's to anybody, that I was able to overcome all of this crap, and I feel I'm just getting started in life now in my 50s. I squandered decades of not caring about anything, not caring if I lived or died. And now I cherish every day. I want other people to feel that way. And so that's my message. So I just finished, just last week, finished my book proposal. So I have a literary agent in Manhattan. And next week, he's going to start sending out the book proposal to various publishing houses. So I'm hoping to come out of COVID with a book deal.
You should. Definitely.
The story's amazing. The book will be amazing. Texas just lifted their ban on everything. And I just got a message on my website the other day from a group in San Antonio who wants me to come down and speak. So I'm hoping that'll come through. So I'm just, I've got another documentary in the works. I had a production firm. They did a documentary on a Boy Scout troop in Louisiana that was formed by two pedophiles for the sole reason to molest boys and to traffic boys. And they did this documentary on this Boy Scout troop, and they sold it instantly. And they said, wow, that sold quick. Maybe with the Boy Scouts just filing bankruptcy, maybe there's more stories out there. We can do more. And they started Googling and came across my story, and the producers reached out to me like, we don't know how in the world we missed this story. Yeah. But we want to do a 4-part story on the Boy Scouts, and we want to, center it around your story.
Wow.
They're marketing just like my agent is marketing. It's going to start marketing the book to publishers. They're marketing. They developed the outline for this 4-part series, and they're marketing it to networks right now. I spoke to them last week. They said we have one network on the hook, and we're trying to get other networks in a bidding war. They said by the end of March, we'll have our deal in place, and we'll get going on this. So I got another documentary in the works, the book, and then just get back speaking. Like I say, I've answered every message I've gotten. So if people want to find me, they can leave a message on my website. It's clarkfredericks.com. Yep. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Most of my postings Instagram and Facebook. So it's simply Clark Fredericks. So they can find me there. Start following me. Come along for the ride. And I'm all about hope and inspiration and bringing light, man. I lived in the darkness. Like I said, that first half of my life was living in the dark, and I don't want to live in the dark anymore, and I don't want other people to live in the dark. So that's the journey I'm on, is to help people heal.
Clark, like I said before, I don't know if saying we're so sorry what happened to you and all that, but it in some ways, hearing your story is so inspirational. I'm so glad you found your way out of it, and that we got a few moments to talk to you. So we really appreciate the time, and please stay safe out there and keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much, Clark.
My pleasure, brother.
And this will be up on the 29th, and I'll send it to you and tag you.
Send me a link.
Yeah, Yeah. So
All right, awesome.
Really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Peace.
Take care, Clark.
Yep.
All right, Clark Fredericks. Like I said, such a heavy but also interesting and an amazing kind of interview, all rolled into one. So it's a really pleasure to have Clark on. As I said in the interview, I was listening to a podcast I listen to it from time to time called Sword and Scale. If you guys are into true crime podcast, and there was a whole episode on Clark's story. And when I was listening to the episode, and he was from Sussex County, New Jersey, which is 20 minutes up the road, I was like, wow, I wonder if we could talk to this guy, because I just found his story very tantalizing. I don't know, very important, I guess, and very kind of outrageous and deep and all those adjectives that I kind of can't come up with at the moment. So, very.
I think the best thing about tonight, and kind of like what he alluded to about being very direct with the situation, is there's like this happening. There can't be sugarcoating. If you sugarcoat it, then you kind of lighten what has gone on, what we've seen hundreds of thousands of times to hundreds of thousands of children and women and adults. It's just it's something that's got to get out there, and it's got to be blunt, where you sit back and be shocked, where you sit back and realize this is a problem. And
yeah, that's one thing I was trying to say to him, like the censoring of these type of things and fluffing things up. There is no censoring. There is no fluffing it up. Like I feel like if you don't want to hear the real story, then you should never invite a guy like him to speak for you, because his story is a real story that, probably a lot of people in the audience may have gone through something similar or know someone, or, there's not that many degrees of separation from stories like that to somebody or to some, or maybe even something that happened to you personally. There's so like to sugarcoat it and call things the incident or whatever Clark was saying, it's just insulting personally.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing out of this is the two things we got to do is prevent this from happening, and those that happen to, we have to get them into the healing process, and that's the biggest key in all this. I mean, you've seen what this led to, and
right.
And he was very to the point, saying it triggered him. Things came up, triggered him, resulted in him getting murdered, going to jail for 5 years, being lucky to just go to jail for 5 years. Right. And he's one of the few who got out and is living his life and living the healing and all. I'm sure there are plenty of scenarios where that may be very similar story, but in the end, maybe the judge wasn't that forgiving, or maybe they didn't allow certain evidence in there. And
right. And I thought one of the most interesting points he brought up was, like when he was saying, if I got away with the murder, would my life be any better? Absolutely not. He said, what do you think I'm going to do? Hide from being molested for so many years and then hide a murder? He's like, I would have been dead from drug use and everything else. So very interesting point. Like the killing of the guy did nothing really. There's no closure in that. In fact, it's just probably adds more issues and more things to deal with that. Like, oh my God, I did that. And so, Mike, it kind of, not in nowhere near Clark's story, but it kind of you brought up a story many episodes ago now at this point, and I thought it was kind of relevant to kind of maybe bring it back up again, just because we're talking about how common these things kind of are, and you kind of, I guess, had a close encounter or something that kind of was a little strange. So I thought it would be a good point for you to maybe retell that story.
Yeah, I very much likely dodged a bullet when I was very young. I was probably either somewhere in the first grade, so I guess was that 6 or 7 years old, somewhere in that ballpark. It was in Pennsylvania, and we had a local ice cream truck that would come by like every day. And I remember one day, me and a buddy ran to the ice cream truck with a friend, and she got her stuff, but we're just hanging there as a friend. We had no money and all, and the guy was like, "Oh, you guys got no money? That's fine." And he got some packages of gumballs, and he gave it to us, and we're like, "Oh, you're so cool! Thank you, thank you, thank you." Then I don't know how long, maybe somewhere in a couple days, weeks, somewhere in there, we just kind of said, "Hey, well, let's go, guys in the area, let's go to the truck and see if we get something or whatever." I mean, you're a kid. Somebody gives out candy. Your first thought is, "Yay, this is a good guy," or whatever.
Free candy, yeah.
Yeah. And then, we go up to the guy and we're just like, "Yeah, we got no money," or whatever. And he was talking to us, and he was like, if you take off your shoes, I'll give you like an ice cream or something like that." And it was kind of weird. First we're like, no. And then it just kept on going. "If you come to the truck and you take off your shoes and your shirt, I'll give you a free ice cream." Ugh. No. If you take off your shirt and your pants and your shoes, the question kept progressing. Well, and as a kid, like, in one way we're thinking this is a joke, and not even to make comedy out of it. If I somewhat recall trying to negotiate him back to like my shoes and my socks.
Yeah.
And nothing came of that. The guy drove away, and I don't know if he came by again or whatever. I don't remember. It wasn't like a regular person, the ice cream man or whatever. So I can't even say he came back another day or something like that. But it was something that happened, and I thought nothing of it. And then years went by, and literally I just remember I think I was in high school, and I'm just sitting at my desk, and the memory popped up, and I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
ew."
Yeah.
And just that realization of, God, he wanted me to get in the truck and take off my clothes. And
yeah, I mean, and Clark even touched on it, right? And any of these, harassment and stories you hear, or molestation and things, it always seems to start with something little, and Clark was mentioning with his scar from surgery, and then it builds and builds and builds as they start to gain your trust and gain power over you. So you could see it there. The guy's trying with just shoes the first time, just pants the next time. So think about that. You kind of forgot about that, and nothing actually did happen to you. Never mind someone who something did happen and they kind of bury it and don't want to talk about it before so that statute of limitations is ridiculous if you think about it. It's like something happened to you, you might not even remember it in some cases. It's so traumatizing. So it's bizarre.
Yeah. And it adds on to our female audience out there and all what they go through later on in life, and it's kind of the same thing where it's a statute of limitations, and then even if it goes to a legal level, it's like, okay, what's your proof? And it's kind of like, well, unless it happened yesterday, how's there ever proof that something happened? And then it's we're going to have to question you and drill you, and you said that before, now you're saying this, so I can't fathom
it's not easy to go through. Who wants to go not only tell that story, but tell that story in front of strangers, courtrooms if you have to, judges, interrogate. That's not easy at all. I imagine that a lot of people who have been through terrible situations, a lot of them just don't want to go through that process in general, and don't want to, and their assailant, or their what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. The person who did these things to them is probably just walking free because they don't want to go through all that due process, and then coming out and bringing back all that stuff and telling about it. It's probably embarrassing, hard, it's difficult. So very easy.
Boys question their sexuality. Women question, am I going to be looked at as a hussy? It's endless. It's sad. I wish I had a simple answer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the best thing we can do is get these stories out there and hopefully help some people heal and help change the world.
Yeah, I had a job where I worked with a guy who, you could tell this guy was off for years and years and years, and was very strange towards kids, specifically little girls. Very, too affectionate, and everybody knew something was off. And it's a perfect example of, like, even people knew and were afraid to go to the supervisor and go put their voice on record, like if you're gonna say something. And this is not the victims. This is the people working with this guy who know something's up or think something's up. And it went on for years. And, like, part of me even feels guilty. Like, man, you knew something was strange. Why didn't you stand up and say something? And at the time, I was, new to my job. I didn't want to make any ripples. And so it was, I had just started. So, like, I feel guilt there, like who knows if I would have said something, or the person next to me would have said something that maybe it would have ended earlier. But eventually, long story short, this guy did end up going to prison and for, like, sexual assault on, like, I don't know, 13 different girls and things like that. And I mean, that's really kind of all I could say about it. But yeah, pretty. So it affects just so many people, like the people that don't know, or the people that might have an inkling. Like, not saying something is tough too. It's tough to kind of realize that. But like I said, I want to let Clark's interview kind of speak for itself. So go check out, if you enjoyed our podcast, go check out the episode of Sword and Scale that he's on. I would say, Mike, you listen to that. I would say that one maybe dives deeper into some details and stuff like that. It's a totally different type of podcast. Like, ours was more of an interview. That one's more of the story. So if you're interested in Clark's, Clark's whole ordeal and what he's been through, and kind of the whole, and it's a very well produced podcast. So that's Sword and Scale. You just got to look up Clark Fredericks. I don't have the episode in front of me.
Yeah, they do it kind of like a Discovery ID show kind of
right.
Format. Highly recommended.
True crime. It's like a documentary almost. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not going to promote anything, but Burlew, what information are we going to bring up today?
Well, if anybody out there has gone through anything or concerned of possibly somebody in their life is close to that, or there's any concerns when it comes to sexual assault, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 800-656-4673. They also have a website, rain.org. That is RAINN.org. I mean, I can't fathom what any of you can be going through or what's going through your mind, but if something's come to you, that's happened to you, and it's hurt you or somebody that you know, the best thing to do is go out and seek some help. Try to get some sort of closure. Try to get your life back in line. Everybody's here with you. Don't think anything about yourself. Please go out and get some help. Again, that hotline number is 800-656-4673, and the site is RAINN.org.
All right, and that's it for us, guys. Like I said, a different episode for us, but very happy to have done it. So go check out Clark Fredericks. He does motivational speaking. You can hire him for different events. He does things virtually too, if you're if you're still not ready to open up from these pandemic rules and whatnot. So please go check him out. And other than that, if you dug what you heard, please like and subscribe to the podcast and follow Clark. And that's it, guys. Life is funny. Laugh at it. Keep the wind at your back.